So I would like to argue that democracy in America is dead. And I wanted to get your initial thoughts on the actual premise of what I'm going to talk about, and then you'll probably see what I mean and likely agree.
I think it's a hell of a claim. I mean, I look at the Americans and I feel like they've got better democratic systems than us. I mean, they've actually got an opposition, for example.
Yes, that is true. They're certainly better off than us. However, I think that there are lots of things specific to American politics, particularly when it comes to the sort of partisanship attacks on Donald Trump, that are very, very questionable. Because, of course, democracy is meant to be about popular vote, letting people have their say. And, of course, this is being interfered with on a mass scale, right? What do you reckon, Stelios?
Well, I mean, the US state is supposed to be a republic, which is in common parlance, let's say, a representative democracy. So there is the element of popular vote, but there is also other elements of a system of checks and balances that mean that sometimes there are limits to what can be a subject that is going to be a subject of popular vote. So I want to see where you're going with this. But one of the things I want to say is that it seems to me that we should look past slogans and past, let's say, party names and just see that Democrats, I think they're doing everything they can to harm American democracy. That's my hunch. But I want to see where you're going to take it.
Sorry for the interruption. I'm Father Calvin Robinson, and you can watch my Common Sense Crusade at 3 p.m. on Thursdays only on lotuseaters.com, where you can sign up for as little as £5 per month. Deus Vult.
You're not too far off, to be honest. But basically, the premise of my argument is that there's one side of the political aisle who don't respect the American Constitution and how America should be run. And they are doing all that they can to persecute Trump, who is the front runner for president. You know, they're using the power of the state to interfere with his ability to campaign and campaign effectively, trying to do all sorts of things that I'm going to quickly go over that have happened over the past few months as well as years, as well as looking at some of the newer things that they're doing for the upcoming 2024 presidential election, which raise a lot of questions about whether democracy is really being preserved here at all. And my argument would be no, it's not. So, of course, back in January, Joe Biden said Trump is a grave threat to democracy. And you may notice that a lot of the language used by the Democrats is the Republicans and Trump, of course, are a threat to our democracy. They're taking ownership of it as if it's a partisan thing. You know, only we can be trusted to be democratic, which to anyone with any sense, that should be setting off alarm bells, that they're claiming that they own democracy. Yes. Well, that's quite an anti-democratic sentiment all on its own. So moving on to Trump. So there's obviously lots of things going on at the minute, and it might be quite easy to lose track of it all. And there's, of course, the hush money case, which is kind of a bit BS, that he paid money to get Stormy Daniels to basically shut up. You know, paying someone money to be quiet doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty. And so there is that aspect of it. But this trial is still ongoing in the run-up to a presidential election, which on its own, perhaps, you know, it's not unheard of before that these sorts of things are going on. But it's the compounding of all of these different things coming up simultaneously. And one has to think that, well, hang on a minute, Donald Trump should be campaigning for president, but he's in court most of the time. He's having all of this money siphoned away from him, you know, death by 1,000 cuts. It is tangibly interfering with his ability to run for president, I think. So, yeah, this one is still ongoing. I'm not sure how much you can legally comment on it, but it seems like it's sort of a money grab and a sort of reputation defamement sort of thing, because I don't think an adult film star really is that concerned with, you know, morality in politics, I would imagine. That's going out on a bit of a limb here. But also you have this one, of course. This was from a little while ago. This was May of 2023. Jury finds Trump liable for sexual abuse and awards accuser $5 million. So they're trotting out all of these cases. This, of course, was related to the columnist E. Jean Carroll, and this was relating to an event in 1996. And it's interesting to me that it's surfacing now rather than in the past. And I think that one thing that's very common about political candidates running, because of course you had it with some of the Supreme Court nominees and lots of other appointees, is that people go digging through their past to find anything that they can throw at a political candidate that they disagree with. And quite often it will be journalists or Democrat activists or people like that, targeting right-wingers. Well, of course, it goes on both sides to a certain extent.
Josh, I want to add something that Victor Davis Hanson said some months ago, that obviously now the attacks on Trump are intensifying because the closer we get to the U.S. elections, the more intense the attacks are going to be. But he said something interesting. Said that the Democrats for now that was months ago. Mm-hmm. We're going to highlight Trump so he could win the Republican candidacy, and then they were going to attack him full scale. And if you remember, before Trump won the Republican primaries, a lot of high-profile Democrats like Gavin Newsom, they were actively going out and telling the other candidates that it's not your time, Trump is going to roll you. They were creating the idea that Trump was going to win, and they were sort of helping him to do so. And they were not attacking him then.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting in two accounts.
But it's a miscalculation, and I'll speak about it more in a bit.
Okay, yeah. I think as well that he's been polling so well that it's somewhat undeniable that he's got a very, very, very good chance in a free and fair election to win. And I think that there's a certain amount of fear and sort of gloves being off again. So, of course, there was the Mar-a-Lago raid where they singled out Trump for having government documents that weren't meant to be on his premises. Of course, Joe Biden had done the same thing, and it was enforced selectively by the FBI to target Trump specifically. And then you had Georgia trying to dismiss. This was criminal charges. Sorry, this was a wrong link. Georgia trying to basically accuse him of interfering with the election by asking for recounts, which is a rather uncharitable reading, because he didn't ask anyone to do anything illegal, which is why they actually ended up throwing out this case and the criminal charges. He was just saying, like, we need to look at, count these votes, make sure everything has been adhered to properly, and therefore the case wouldn't stick. But the fact that there was this case going on, and there was the rhetoric of, well, he started this insurrection and he's trying to overthrow election results, whereas that was a misrepresentation of what he's trying to do. Sure, he would like the election results to be overturned, but he was asking for sort of due process and to look at whether the results were legitimate or not through legal means. He was taking it through the courts. He wasn't taking people with rifles and taking over the institutions as you might expect from an actual insurrection. And this sort of framing seems to indicate that, well, they're doing this sort of thing purely for the PR of doing it rather than actually expecting it to stick, because it's pretty obvious that, yes, he wasn't actually asking anyone to do anything illegal here. And the one that I thought I was going on to was that Colorado tried to remove him from the ballot and prevent people from even voting for him in the first place. And that's probably one of the more clear examples. And there are other states that tried to follow suit. But of course, the Supreme Court, as I covered previously, said that it's not up to the states to determine who is on the ballot in a federal election. It's up to a federal institution and also themselves, clearly, because they ruled on it. And of course, they said it was unconstitutional. So there's also this, that people have realized. If I go to page 30, all the way down here, there was a recent opinion poll here that says, do you agree or disagree that there is a double standard and bias at Joe Biden's Department of Justice, the FBI, the IRS, where they continue to target Republicans like Donald Trump, but these same groups go easy and give sweetheart deals to Joe Biden and his family members when the evidence shows Joe Biden and his family have failed to pay their taxes, taken bribes, and extorted money from our enemies such as the Communist Chinese and Russia? And this is quite a resounding result, isn't it?
Kind of a leading question, not going to lie.
It is a leading question. That much is true.
But even with that as a leading question, I mean, we're looking at this. 56% of people agree, 41% strongly,
Yeah,
31% disagree.
but of course, if you're asking Democrats, right, they're going to clock on the leading question and push back against it quite heavily. So the fact that it's leaning so heavily in agreement that, yeah, you know, he might be bad, but even we can see that there's a certain amount of double standard here. That seems to indicate to my mind that it's got to such an extent that even the people who stand to benefit politically from the persecution of Donald Trump are saying, hang on a minute, what's going on here? This is sort of going to create a broken window effect where this is going to be the standard applied to all politicians, which isn't to really anyone's benefit persecuting someone to that degree, because then no one will run. But I wanted to move on to the election side of things, because I think it's quite clear that the state has been going after Donald Trump. We've been covering it pretty extensively, but putting it all together, I think, helps make the case that there is this problem with American democracy at the minute. And of course, this article did the rounds quite a lot, didn't it? The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election, from Time magazine. And this was focusing on things like how they changed laws and things like that. And I actually did a summary of it because it's quite a long article. I'm just going to read a few quotes to put in mind the kind of thing that they did in the run-up to the 2020 election, because this will sort of inform what's going to go on in the 2024 election. I actually think that they're going to go a lot harder this time round than they did previously, because they themselves have been saying, well, we're a lot more confident this time that our ability to stop Donald Trump if he goes rogue, as they said, is higher, which I think is a euphemism for saying we're going to stop him getting elected, even if it's legitimate. But here are some quotes from this that I pulled out. They're not necessarily all together, just in isolation. For more than a year, a loosely organized coalition of operatives scrambled to shore up American institutions as they came under simultaneous attack from a remorseless pandemic and autocratically inclined president. Their work touched every aspect of the election. They got states to change voting systems and laws and helped secure hundreds of millions in public and private funding. They fended off voter suppression lawsuits, recruited armies of poll workers, and got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time. I mean, I don't know how they didn't realize how this sounds, this article here. So it goes on to say, Trump plotting to block a legitimate vote count, and he spent the following November 3rd trying to steal the election he'd lost, with lawsuits and conspiracy theories, pressure on the state and local officials, and finally, the summoning of his army of supporters to Jan 6 rally that ended in deadly violence at the Capitol. That's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election, they were fortifying it, which is the infamous euphemism that is used to refer to this election. And I'm still shocked that they published this. I don't know about you guys, but this seems relatively naked to my mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's unbelievably brazen. It's just not news, is it? Because they released this, what was it, the same month as it was in January?
Mm-hmm.
So it was amazing because at the same time, all of the mainstream media was saying, no one was working behind the scenes. That's a mad thing to say. And then the Times came out and just went, yeah, we did.
We did, and we're proud about it.
I think, okay.
Mm-hmm. So that's, I suppose, the Democrat side of things, that they were fortifying the election to guarantee that democracy wasn't going to be overtaken. And the opposing side, if you wanted to have a look at that, is probably best evidenced by Here is the Evidence, which is a very good name for evidence. But here there's a massive sort of link dump of all of the different links to various pieces of evidence to suggest that unusual things happened, largely to do with illegal votes here. That's the lion's share of what you can find. And so in total, there are 1,687 pieces of evidence. And so with that amount of evidence, of course, a large amount of it is going to be duds, right? It's going to be reasonable explanations. And of course, there's going to be a certain amount of just honest mistakes that happen in an election of that size. However, one has to wonder, well, surely with all of these pieces of evidence, there must be some stuff that has a point, right? And of course, I haven't been through all 1,687, but I did do a fair amount of digging. I think that there is at least a sort of a case that gives them a degree of plausible deniability, I suppose. It's the best way I can put it. But a similar article to that Time magazine one was published relatively recently in the Rolling Stone magazine. And I wanted to have a look at this one because this talks about their plans from Biden campaign insiders, if you will. They spoke to a fair few people. As they said, they spoke to Democratic lawmakers, operatives, Biden campaign advisors, administration officials, all told Rolling Stone the same thing. They at least seem to make out here, if they're to be trusted. And I picked out some quotes from the article because it is, again, quite long, that I thought were interesting. And they said, over the past year, Team Biden has been conducting war games, crafting complex legal strategies, and devoting extensive resources to prepare for, as one former senior Biden administration official puts it, all hell breaks loose scenarios. President Biden has been worried for a while now that Donald Trump is going to try to steal the election. If it's very close on election day, says a source familiar with Biden's thinking, if it ends up being the case, we are also expecting the Republican Party to go into overdrive to help him steal it. We are continuing to build out the infrastructure to ensure that doesn't happen again. If President Biden wins and Trump and MAGA Republicans try to confuse everyone and sow chaos. So what I find interesting here is that they're even imagining a scenario where Biden's win is close because the polling, if that's to be believed, of course, there have been cases where polling is inaccurate, is very much in Trump's favor. And of course, Biden's actions while in office have left a lot to be desired. The cost of living has gone up. You know, you've got the withdrawal from Afghanistan. There are a whole host of things that he's done poorly. Attaching his name to his economic policy probably didn't help Bidenomics when the cost of everything is going up. That's very, very stupid to my mind. So it carries on to say, Team Biden has been planning for years, sketching out what Trump could do as the leader of the GOP, and has partnered with the Democratic National Committee and a vast network of liberal attorneys and legal groups to conduct similar doomsday-style wargaming. So, sort of translating the euphemism here, they've basically got an army of legal representatives to challenge pretty much everything that Donald Trump is going to do. And if there is sort of tomfoolery on the Democrats' part, and he makes a legal challenge, my guess is that they've arranged the institutions in such a way in which he's not going to get a fair hearing. He's not already getting a fair hearing, to be honest, in many courts. And so this isn't necessarily a stretch to suggest, right?
What I find particularly tragic is that not just in democracy, but in any other form of government, you have very bad consequences when those who rule have either no morals or are unaware of self-criticism. And the Democrats are trying to portray Trump as a Caesar-like figure who exerts a kind of power over people's minds, and in return they show him loyalty, more loyalty to him than they do in the, let's say, the Republic or something. But you have to ask yourself, who says this? What are they doing to protect their own country? For instance, there is, for years now, a crisis in the US border.
Mm-hmm.
They do nothing. The federal government is actively making it worse.
Well,
when Democrat people from the non-federal branch are complaining about it, like the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. Mm-hmm. So when you have a party that governs the country in such a way that tries to completely destroy all of it, and they say the main opposition is someone who wants to destroy all of it, the message isn't going to be strong.
Yeah, it's not going to land if you're flooding the country with illegal immigrants and crime has got worse, the economy's got worse. You know, all the metrics are trending negative. And of course, it's worth mentioning as well that if they were legitimately confident that there had been no misgivings in the previous election, surely they should have been like, well, have an investigation, go on, have a look. You know, we haven't done anything wrong. And then you can allow Donald Trump to make a fool of himself if he's making accusations which are, verified by everyone as being fairly investigated, then it's easy. They didn't have to do all of this propaganda warring. And it makes me think that if you're protesting this much, it's that lady doth protest if too much sort of thing, of if you're protesting his skepticism at the way elections are being conducted to this extent, well, that to my mind suggests that you've got something to hide, because the better thing for everyone involved and American democracy more generally is that you take these accusations seriously and investigate them and have an honest look at it, right? Because it's in no one's interest to, have a dictatorship by the back door. I don't think any Americans really want that. It's not in their culture to have that sort of thing. And so that would have been what you would have expected if they were acting honestly. But it carries on to say, one swing state Democratic election official involved with these efforts refers to it as a superstructure of various legal teams and liberal operatives who are going to fight on all fronts and let them have it from all sides if MAGA wants to tear down our democracy. But the way they've been using our democracy just means the Democratic Party, basically, because they take ownership of the democracy. Therefore, it's a proxy for the Democratic Party. That's the sort of sloganeering they've been using. And so you can read past this veiled language and this propaganda to sort of get a window into some of their intentions. And I'm just going to read two more parts before I start looking at some other things. And it says, a spokesperson for the Democratic National Committee tells Rolling Stone that the National Party is also setting aside tens of millions of dollars in robust voter protection programs to safeguard the rights of voters to make their voices heard against relentless attacks from Donald Trump and the GOP. And of course, Donald Trump's attacks against voting isn't against American citizens, right? It's against the dead voting, illegals voting, mail-in ballots, which are more susceptible to fraud. We saw that in Britain. It's actually uncontroversial in Britain to say that mail-in ballots lead to more fraud because we've had real-world cases in Leicester, for example, right? And those are legitimate concerns, I think. Those are fundamental matters of election integrity that should be taken seriously. But they're framing it as if he wants to stop, American citizens from voting. And I think that's part of the reason why they flipped out about voter ID and things like that. It's just nonsense. But final thing it says is, meanwhile, the Trump campaign and the RNC have invested in an army of conspiratorial, election-denying legal staff to undermine our elections and make it harder for Americans' ballots to be counted. Well, that's not really what's going on, is it? They want to be thorough in their counting to avoid fraud. We won't let the Republicans get away with these baseless attacks on our democracy. We will continue to use every tool at our disposal to strengthen our democracy as MAGA extremists attempt to tear it down. So, considering the reality of the situation and how they're framing it here, it seems to my mind that 2024's presidential election is going to be a very interesting one, to say the least, to put it lightly, right?
There's going to be just as much, it's not real because blah, 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 except this time from the Democrats. And then there's going to be massive fights about it for, the first year of his presidency.
It seems like it, yeah, if he's even going to be allowed. I don't know what's going to happen because it's such a complicated thing that it's almost difficult for one person to comprehend, right? But this
happened last time as well, 2016. Well, the whole first year was trying to prove that Russia did it. And that was just obviously going to go nowhere because it was bollocks.
Well, it was a conspiracy theory at the end of the day. They threw it at us, but that's what it was on the Democrats' side of things. But an actual one, there wasn't any evidence. And they even still talk about it now, even though they had investigation after investigation with partisan people who still couldn't dig up dirt. So it seems like there wasn't any truth to it. But it's getting to such an extent that New York City Council has called for the Court of Appeals for, I think it's the third time they're doing this now, to reverse a ruling barring illegal immigrants from voting in local elections. And in Arizona, non-citizens are already allowed to vote in federal elections. So this is already happening. You know how they're bussing in lots of illegal immigrants.
That's literally just treason, but okay.
Yeah, it is. How you can claim to be protecting democracy whilst you're allowing non-citizens to vote in a domestic election. I think a democracy is about self-governance. It's not self-governance if foreign people have a say over your
governance.
Yeah.
Exactly. And one thing to say, because it may be a bit unpopular, but I think democracy requires a kind of homogeneous population. You can't combine multiculturalism and democracies.
No,
you
can't,
just can't.
because you just create voting blocks that
Yeah.
ultimately have opposing interests, and in a sort of political zero-sum game, that just creates tensions, and it's what's happening now, actually. And I just wanted to quickly go over some very brief stuff of just in the past couple of months, elections that have had problems. So in Chicago, they mysteriously found 10,000 missing ballots in the Dem district attorney primary race.
Can we just talk about that one? Because people
course.
think, oh, just 10,000 ballots might not be a big issue. I was reading this one. The difference between the two candidates was 2,000.
Yes.
So then suddenly finding 10 grand worth of ballots.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, this
It
is
makes
huge.
a significant deal, doesn't it? It could change the nature of an election.
Well, it definitely did.
It did, yeah. And then here we have Texas, and it says, after declaring a successful hand count of ballots, Gillespie County Republicans had to fix a series of errors in the results reported from almost every precinct. So that's quite worrying.
I just love how American that is, though. It's just literally every precinct can't even count pieces of paper. But I'm sorry, a hand count and you messed up in every single precinct.
Pretty much all of our ballots hand counted in Britain.
To the ones I've been to, yes.
Yeah, I've not seen any machine counted stuff. I don't know.
I don't think we use them.
No. I think we're a small enough country as well to just about be able to get away with it, right?
The Americans could too as well.
They could still do it. I think
I don't know why
it'd be
they use machines, but
it'd be better for them to hand count it and do it properly under proper supervision than the machines do it and have all the errors that they've had before. But here's another one. This is 2 months ago. Virginia officials find misreported 2020 election votes added to Trump's total. And this was actually for the sake of transparency. Biden actually received fewer votes and Trump received more than he should have here. So
2,300.
Yes. It's still a significant amount to be out by, right? The accuracy of it, of just counting things. One has to question the entire process here.
That's almost 4,000 votes when you count them all up.
Yeah, it's a massive amount to be out by. If I were to apply that level of precision to my data science research, I would never be able to get a research grant ever again with that level of inaccuracy. So it's unacceptable in private scientific research. Surely something as important as the fate of your nation, these sorts of things should be sorted. And I think this is why I think American democracy is in danger, but it's not for the reason that the Democrats actually argue. So now we've been through it all, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the Americans have muddled their way through all of this so far.
Well, I don't think
They'll
it's going to
keep
be the
on
end of
muddling.
America or anything. I just think that there's a very strong case here that the democratic process has been subverted to such an extent that it seems strange almost to call it a democracy, because it's a sort of oligarchic system where the elites are just fighting amongst themselves. You're not really having much direct democracy here, are you? But what do you think, Stelios?
Well, I don't know about direct democracy. Maybe that would lead to the considerations about tyranny of the majority.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. I think it's not supposed to be a direct democracy. It's supposed to be a representative one. But well, I don't know about this. I generally speaking don't like talking about stuff that I haven't researched extensively.
Mm-hmm.
So I will reserve judgment. But generally speaking, if these are the numbers and the error, that seems quite big.
Mm.
At least it seems to merit a recounting.
But all of this put together, do you think there is a cause for concern here?
Well, yeah, most certainly. I mean, I think there should always be cause of concern, because when people are not concerned about what is going on, that's when the real problem begins.
I think that's a good note to end it on.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium contents on the site, such as our Lads Hour, this episode, and what would you do if you were king for the day. If you want to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.